YouTube, what it do? It's your boy Bako99, and first let me apologize. I was not able to get a video out last week because I had a Windows update and an Adobe update, and everything got all out of whack. So now I'm on to my backup computer. Wanted to make sure I get out at least the ranking videos this week, and as I fix my other computer, then I'll be back with more videos. But appreciate you checking me out. And also, one major tip I wanted to give that's been helping me out, whether it's in daily fantasy or season-long fantasy, is that 50% of the time when you're trying to depend who to put in your lineup, you need to take away the name of the player. Just take the name of the player, throw it away, and invest in the situation and the matchup and the teams. Perfect example, the Seattle Seahawks. It doesn't matter if you start Rawls or if you start Christian Michelson. Rawls is a better running back than Michelson, but either way, the Seattle Seahawks running game will produce fantasy points no matter who's in there. Same thing with DeMarco Murray with the Tennessee Titans. I drafted DeMarco Murray high this year in my season-long fantasy, but it wasn't that I thought DeMarco Murray was better than this running back or that running back. It was that I invested in the Tennessee Titans run game and what their coaching wants to do, what their offensive scheme wants to do. So remember that sometimes take the player name out the equation and focus on the situation of the game and the team and the outcome and the game flow, and I promise you that'll help you out a lot. But with further ado, let's get into these weekly rankings for week 4. Alright, so now we're going to kick things off with the quarterback rankings like we always do, and I'm going to go through this list really quick, and then I'm going to talk about 4 key plays for this week at the quarterback position. But let's start at the top with the number 1 ranking quarterback of week 4, and that's Phillip Rivers. They're going against the Saints. And second, we got Cam Newton, and you can see Cam Newton's salary is $9,300 on FanDuel, $7,800 on DraftKings. That's pretty high, so I'm not sure if I really want to pay up that high for a quarterback this week, but Cam Newton's still a good player. Number 2. Number 3, we got Joe Flacco. Number 4 in the rankings, we got Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins to me is just average, if at best, and he'll have a couple of good games sprinkled out throughout the year like he did the last 4 games of last year. But however, I do think this is one of those games where Kirk Cousins is going to come out and fool everybody with a good game. I can actually see him throwing 3 to 4 touchdowns against the Browns this week. I see Jordy Reed going off this week, finally getting off the snide on the fantasy points as well. So Kirk Cousins is a really good play coming in at the number 4 ranking. And then we have Drew Brees against the Chargers, Andrew Luck against the Jaguars, Matthew Stafford, Blake Bortles. Yes, Brian Hoyer is on the list this week. Anybody going against the Lions right now, with their defense, is going to be on the list. So Brian Hoyer is not a mistake. He is on the rankings for this week as a possible good play. And then finishing off, we have Dak Prescott. Now, we all know that playing a quarterback can rack up the stats is crucial to your success, whether it's in DFS or if it's in seasonal long league. So the guys that I have here are not a surprise, but any quarterback facing the Atlanta Falcons, New Orleans Saints, or even Chicago finds themselves always at the top of the rankings. So Cam Newton comes in most rankings I see for this week as number 1. I personally feel that he's a bad play in daily fantasy because of his high salary. You really need to save some money at the quarterback position because there are options, like I mentioned, Kirk Cousins. But especially in seasonal long, you need to have Cam Newton in your lineup because even when the Panthers have a rough game, he's always going to put up decent numbers because of his running ability as well as his passing ability. But a lot of the rankings I saw this week, they have Cam Newton number 1. So for that, I'm going to put that up here as the number 1. But I really think this week probably want to pay down in daily fantasy so you can save some money and pay up for the running backs. But however, though, if in seasonal long, Cam Newton's a very strong play this week, so you can feel confident about him starting. The number 2 quarterback play of the week is Phillip Rivers, and they're going against the New Orleans Saints. The Saints have allowed the 8th most passing yards in the league, while Phillip Rivers has a nice 5-0 touchdown interception ratio. Rivers has dealt with a lot of injuries among his receivers, but he's making do with what he got pretty well. Both teams will pull up points in this one, so we all going to enjoy this shootout this week. Number 3, and this is one of my favorite plays of the week, and that's Matthew Stafford going against the Chicago Bears. Chicago is dealing with a lot of injuries on their defense now, and they have to go up against Detroit's gunslingers, who ranks third in the league in passing yards. To kind of sum up what the Detroit offense is pass, 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 pass. That's what the Detroit Lions do every week in and week out. Stafford is averaging 328 passing yards per game, and simply put, Chicago doesn't have anyone to cover Golden Tate or Marvin Jones. A big week ahead for Stafford and company, and for all you Golden Tate owners out there, I know he's been underperforming and Marvin Jones been balling out, which I've been telling everybody since the beginning back in July that he was going to put up a better fantasy year than Golden Tate. But this is the week that Golden Tate should be able to put up some points and finally get over the hump of his poor performances. So any Golden Tate owners should be able to start him this week and be happy with it. And last but not least is my man Drew Brees against the San Diego Chargers. Brees is the only quarterback in the league this year with over 1,000 yards, and at the same time, San Diego is one of only 2 teams that have allowed over 1,000 yards passing through the first 3 games. So Brees has plenty of weapons at his disposal, and tight end Kobe Fleener finally looks to be like a dynamic part of the offense. A big week is in store for Brees in a shootout with your boy Phillip Rivers. On to the week 4 running back rankings. Once again, I'm going to go through these real quick, and then we're going to talk about a couple of players. Coming in at the top ranking of the week is Carlos Hyde. And the 49ers just run so many plays. It's not even close to the second team that runs the most volume of plays per game. So that alone is going to have Carlos Hyde up in the rankings, and he has a pretty decent low salary actually on FanDuel and DraftKings, so he's the number 1 play this week for your daily fantasy lineups. Then we have DeMarco Murray. You just got to invest in that Tennessee run game. That's all they do is run the ball. We have CJ Anderson at number 3, Melvin Gordon at number 4, Jordan Howard. And if you guys not aware that Langford is out for a lengthy period of time, so Jordan Howard stepping in, and he's actually a better running back, and he was going to take Langford's spot anyway. So right now, when he's really cheap, it's a very good value play in daily fantasy. And if you're out there in need of a running back, and if he's still in your waivers, he's definitely going to go pick up off your waivers. After that, we got Ty Gurley, Matt Jones, Spencer Ware, Justin Forsett, and Cameron Artis-Payne. And moving on to our top 4 running back plays of the week, and yes, he is back, and that's Le'Veon Bell. But let me say something about Le'Veon Bell. One more suspension for stupid stuff, and he's finna be blacklisted, because let's be honest, how many of you out there got burned by Josh Gordon this year? I mean, people who have problems seem to rarely fix the problems, and that's just something that's going to be a headache. They're not dependable and all of that. So I'm giving Le'Veon Bell, because of his talent, he is great. I'm still all about Le'Veon Bell, but I swear, one more suspension for drugs or not showing up to drug tests, any of that type of stuff, I'm done with Bell. But as it stands, head coach Mike Tomlin said that Bell is highly conditioned and he'll be used a lot in his season debut. Kansas City is allowing just under 4.3 yards per carry, and Bell's work in the passing game figures to increase his fantasy output potential. So I'm looking at 100 total yards is damn near his baseline of his worst performance here coming into his season debut. Next, the number 2 ranking of this week's best plays is David Johnson. Johnson might be the best complete back in all of football, and if he isn't, then he's surely in the top 2 or 3. He's gone over 100 total yards in each of the games this season. While the Rams have been solid against the run, they've allowed the 10th most receiving yards to opposing backs. Johnson's workload and talent level makes it nearly impossible to rank him outside the top 5 in most weeks. He's essentially a matchup proof for any week. So this week, I do like the matchup against the Rams. So David Johnson's coming in at number 2. Number 3 play of the week, and that's CJ Anderson against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Anderson had only 41 total yards last week, but he will face the Bucs defense this week that has allowed the 7th most fantasy points to the position this season. Expect Anderson to get more looks in the passing game this week, seeing as Tampa Bay has been extremely vulnerable to the pass-catching backs this season. Anderson should have a very nice bounce-back week in week 4 this week. And last in the rankings, and I know the Dallas Cowboy fans gonna love this one, and that's Ezekiel Elliott. And I really wish my videos and computer wasn't messed up last week, because I was predicted that Ezekiel would finally have a breakout game, which he did. And if only the Cowboys would let Zeke get the dang touches near the goal line and stop giving them to Morris, then Elliott would be awesome all the way up to this point. But Elliott is still so valuable in all fantasy formats, despite his coach screwing him out of those goal line carries. His 71 carries are third in NFL, while the 274 rushing yards are tied for second. Roll with Ezekiel Elliott in all formats. Now we have week 4 wide receiver rankings, and let me tell you something. This week there is so much good value in daily fantasy with these salaries for the wide receivers this week, which is why that I'm recommending paying top dollar for your running backs. And because there's plenty of receivers out there that's going to produce at extremely low price points on DraftKings and FanDuel. So starting off, we have Kelvin Benjamin. I've ranked him number 1 because I love when a good player has a bad week and everybody's down on him, because they always seem to bounce back with a great performance the following week. And that's what I think is going to happen here with Kelvin Benjamin. So he's coming in at number 1. Then we have Larry Fitzgerald. Larry Fitzgerald just has a huge mismatch against the inside cornerback going against the Rams, so he'll be able to abuse that position. So he comes in at number 2. We have DeAndre Hopkins, Tyrell Williams, Michael Crabtree with another good matchup against a cornerback where he should dominate. Marvin Jones, I called him out last week and you saw what he did, and there's no reason why he can't. He's not going to probably do 200 yards passing and receiving again, but he'll definitely is due for another big game along with Golden Tate against the Bears. And then to wrap it up in the rankings, we have Mike Wallace, Antonio Brown, Allen Hurns. I got Allen Hurns on here because this has to be his week. He has not caught a touchdown pass this year so far, but this is that type of game where I think people are forgetting about Allen Hurns, and I wouldn't be surprised if he catches a touchdown or 2. We got Terrell Pryor, which I think is fool's gold, but a lot of people are high on Terrell Pryor, and he is versatile, so he is on the rankings, but he's really not my cup of tea, honestly. And then we have Kevin White. Alshon Jeffries, once again, is questionable like he is every week. The man just don't want to play. He just hates to practice. He just wants to show up on games, which is probably why he's always aggravating a hamstring or something. So I think Kevin White is going to be the better receiver this week in fantasy for the Bears against the Lions. So he's made the last of our rankings for this week's rankings. Now on to the week 4 wide receiver top plays. And first we got Antonio Brown. Just take a look at the picture up of Antonio Brown, because that sums up what this man does. Brown's 305 receiving yards are 4th most in all of football, but he does happen to lead the league in targets with 40 though. The Chiefs have been solid thus far against wideouts, but Brown is a different type of breed. We all know that. Other guys around him struggled last week, like Marcus Wheaton, dropping touchdown passes, hitting him in his chest, prompting quarterback Ben Roethlisberger to look Brown's way 18 times last game. He's a surefire wide receiver 1 this week. Even with Marcus Peters covering him, I would still roll with Antonio Brown. Number 2 is Allen Robinson. Robinson came back to fantasy relevance last week, hauling in 2 touchdown passes from Blake Bortles. Robinson had just 1 catch in the last year's final meeting, but the game got out of hand quickly and Robinson was lost in the shuffle. He did have 12 targets in the other game against Indy last year, but however, his 31 targets rank in the top 10, and he will likely be utilized often in this potential shootout as well. Number 3 is Julio Jones. And Julio Jones is just like I was talking about with Kelvin Benjamin. He had a real bad fantasy game last Monday, so expect him to really come back and bounce back strong. Jones couldn't get going last week against New Orleans, but despite facing a tougher defense this week, he has a great opportunity to produce. In the 2 games last year against the Panthers, he caught 16 passes on 21 targets for 266 yards and 1 touchdown. That was with Josh Norman in town when he was on the Carolina Panthers, so he's likely going to see some double coverage this go round, but Atlanta will have to use him more this week than last week, so he's definitely a wide receiver 1 this week in week 4. And last on the rankings for the wide receiver top 4 plays of the week, and I'm going to admit, I'm not going to hide it, I'm a Houston Texans fan, and I am a DeAndre Hopkins fanboy. So you better believe that if he's on these rankings, it is not because I am biased. It is because this week he is going to destroy the Tennessee Titans. I have not really had him ranked top so far in any of my rankings this year in fantasy football, but this is the week that Andre is going to break out and give you production like he gave last year. I'm aware that Fuller so far has been outproducing Hopkins, but this is the week everything changed. I was actually looking at some of Hopkins' numbers in the past against the Titans, and he obliterates the Titans. In his last 3 games, the Titans, he caught 24 passes on 31 targets for 449 yards and 4 touchdowns. Now, the Titans' defense has gotten better, but they are still not ready to contain DeAndre Hopkins, so he is a must-play this week in fantasy football. Now let's take a look at week 4 tight end rankings. And I have to admit, man, the tight ends are so weak this year. It is hard to truly find good plays outside of the top 3 tight ends. But this week, we do have some nice plays where we can rack up some fantasy points with the tight ends. So let's get it kicked off. Number 1 is Zach Miller. I'm telling you, the Bears, going against the Lions, and the Lions linebackers are so depleted right now, so any receiver, slot receiver, tight end is usually going to be a good play until the Lions defense gets healthy. So Zach Miller comes in at the number 1 ranking. And then we got Jordy Reed. I think this is the week Jordy Reed will break out. So if you have Jordan, you need to play him. He will break out against the Browns. And then we have Greg Olsen, Dennis Pitta, Kobe Fleener, Rob Gronkowski. Now, Rob Gronkowski only got limited snaps against the Texans in his season debut, but he also would have had a touchdown if the pass would have been thrown to him. It was a goal line play. You know, Gronk goes out on the wide where there's a mismatch, and they just throw it up in the air. If he would have just threw a good throw, then Gronk would have got a touchdown in that game, but I think he only had, 0 points maybe, but he's going to have a decent game, and in Belichick, I trust. So Rob Gronkowski is ranked this week, so if you have him, go ahead and play him. And we have Hunter Henry with Antonio Gates out on injury and how much the Chargers are going to pass with the potential shootout against the Saints. Hunter Henry is a very good play this week. And then to wrap it up, we have Jacob Tamme, Jason Witten, and Dwayne Allen. Now let's look at the top 4 plays for tight ends in week 4. And the first one is what I'm high on. I'm going to roll with Jordan Reed in every chance I get and every format I get this week, because Reed has yet, like I mentioned, to really have a breakout game, but he is still 3rd among tight ends with 190 receiving yards through the 3 games. The Browns have yet to allow a touchdown to tight ends, but it's about time that quarterback Kirk Cousins provides Reed with ample opportunities so he can have a breakout game. This could be the chance, and it's a great chance that the whole Washington crew has an exceptional week in fantasy, and that's including Jordan Reed as well. Number 2 is Greg Olsen against the Atlanta Falcons. Now, the Falcons have allowed the 2nd most fantasy points to the position, and Olsen leads all tight ends with 259 receiving yards. He's one of the top 2 options in the passing attack for the Carolina Panthers, and Atlanta Falcons have allowed 4 touchdowns against tight ends through just 3 games already this year. So that's why he's in my top 4 plays this week, because he should shred the Atlanta Falcons secondary and tight ends. Next is Rob Gronkowski. I've already spoken a little bit about Gronkowski, but Gronk played just 14 snaps last week, 2 of which were pass routes, but the positive news is that he reported no setbacks in his injury, indicating that he should receive more snaps in this upcoming week. He should be involved in the passing game more often, and Buffalo will have trouble containing him. There is some risk because we're not 100% sure how he feels, but come on, it's Rob Gronkowski. And to wrap up our top plays for the tight end position in week 4 is Dennis Pitta. Now, we was on Dennis Pitta early, and he paid off for us the last 2 weeks in fantasy, but I'm starting to feel now that most people are starting to come around to Dennis Pitta as he works his way up into the top echelon of tight ends. Pitta's 18 receptions are tied with Olsen's for the league lead, and his 3 receptions of 20+ yards are tied for second at the positions. Now, the Raiders have been horrendous defending the pass this year in fantasy football, and including a whopping 17.5 yards per reception. So fire up Pitta as a tight end 1 option this week for sure. And to finally wrap up the video, we're going to go over the week 4 top rankings for defensive and special teams. And this is the trend that you've noticed that I've done, was picking on these horrible teams. So I have Washington Redskins ranked the top defense this week because they're going against the Browns. I have Denver Broncos ranked number 2 because they're going against the Tampa Bay Bucks. And the reason why they're ranked number 2 is because Winston will have turnovers, whether it comes from a strip sack, whether it comes from just a bad throw, or whether it comes from a batted ball at the line, at the defensive line, and gets picked off. He will turn the ball over against the Denver Broncos. That's not saying that Jameis Winston won't go off and do good this week, but he gets a lot of garbage points, is why he's in the top 5 ranked quarterback this year. But he is vulnerable for a lot of turnovers against a heavy pass rush team like the Denver Broncos. And then next we have the Seattle Seahawks, the New England Patriots, the Arizona Cardinals. We actually have the Los Angeles Rams against the Cardinals. And don't be surprised, the Cardinals have actually not been playing well this year. And next we have the Minnesota Vikings. Now I know you're probably looking at the Minnesota Vikings and like, why are they down so low? But take away some of their fluke defensive touchdowns. I'm not really going to say they're fluke, but I mean, Marcus Mariota's been playing horrible, and 2 of those touchdowns off turnovers came against him. 1 was on a screen pass. I mean, if you can't throw a screen pass without getting pick 6, then you're just having issues. So the Vikings are a very solid defensive team this year, but take away some of those touchdown off turnovers and they're pretty much just in the top 5 rankings. But this week against the Giants, I do see them giving up a little bit more points. But then after that, we have Houston Texans, kind of the same boat, with J.J. Watt being out for the year. That's going to take a hit to some of their sacks, which will take away from some of the fantasy points. But still, they're a tough defense, and they're in the rankings. And to wrap up the final 2 teams, if you need some choices of who to play, would be the Kansas City Chiefs against the Steelers or the Carolina Panthers against the Falcons. Well, that'll do it for our week 4 rankings. Remember, if you like the video, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to come to you more now that I have my backup computer up and running. I'll be sure not to go a week without a video for you guys, but my goal is to also do more videos with waiver pickups and things like that. So appreciate you checking out the video, and good luck this week in fantasy, and we'll recap what we saw from the rankings and who produced and who didn't produce. See you then. Good luck. Peace.